If you've been pondering over the thought of getting into sim racing recently, you need to drop everything you're doing and watch this video, because now is the perfect time to get into the hobby. With the start of the virus that shan't be named, some of the greatest names in motorsports got into sim racing. Even some of the biggest motorsport events such as Formula 1, NASCAR and the 24 Hours of Le Mans held virtual events. Naturally, this led to a huge boom in the popularity of sim racing in 2020 and 21, and in turn, the prices of sim racing hardware increased dramatically. However, now everyone is actually allowed to go outside, you'll actually be able to enter the sim racing world on a budget. In this video, I'm going to be using my 6 years of sim racing knowledge to guide you on how to get into sim racing on a budget in 2022. The first step of getting into the hobby is deciding which platform you would like to race on. Is it console or PC? Before you do anything else, you need to answer these questions. You don't want to buy an entire sim racing setup, only later to find out that it's not compatible with your platform. Of course, if you already own one of these platforms, the decision is kind of a no-brainer, but if you're totally new to gaming in general, I would definitely recommend picking PC. Yeah, sure, a console is cheap, but in a couple years you're gonna want to switch to PC. It's practically the course of nature. It's simply the superior platform, so buying a PC from the get-go may be a worthwhile investment. But if someone put a gun to my head and told me I had to race on console, I would definitely choose the PlayStation.
You take the red pill, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
This is because on PlayStation you get the Gran Turismo franchise, which is a far superior racing simulation as compared to Xbox's Forza. It offers much better competitive racing and a more realistic simulation overall. But if you are on console, you're just delaying the inevitable of joining the PC Master Race. PC has better sims and you can even mod them, which I'll cover a little bit later on when we discuss racing sims in more depth. So now you've picked your poison, it's time to select your peripherals. The wheels and pedals are the most important aspect of your sim racing setup. It's true that most simulators are compatible with gamepads or even keyboards, and there are plenty of racers that use them. But at that point, is it really sim racing? If you do try playing racing simulations on either of these, you're bound to have a bad time. Racing simulations aren't like your casual racing games, and they aren't designed with gamepads or keyboards in mind. Meaning you're going to have a tough time controlling your car. So if you want to play racing sims, you're definitely going to need a wheel. When I first started out, I got the Logitech G920. It also comes in the G29 variant and they're practically identical, except the G920 is for Xbox and the G29 PlayStation. Both are compatible with PC however. The Logitech offerings are perfect for anyone wanting to get into sim racing on a budget. They cost around 300 Great British Pounds or $400 US, and with that you get a durable wheel and a free pedal set. You can also throw in a H-pattern shifter for a little extra, which is a worthwhile add-on in my opinion. It just means you won't have to use the flappy paddles and will actually have a realistic shift in action in anything other than a race car. However, Logitech recently came out with the Logitech G923. This is their upgraded version of both the previously mentioned wheels. But as far as I can tell, there isn't much difference. Much like the successor to the G29 being almost identical, the predecessor to it is again almost identical. If you want to sim race on an extreme budget, you can find Logitech's G27 secondhand at a very reasonable price. Again, the G27 will offer an almost identical experience for under a quarter of the price. Now, the other company that makes wheels for budget sim racers is called Thrustmaster. They have a lot of models which can be quite confusing. However, the models you should look out for are the T300, the T150 or the TMX. They're all decent wheels and cover a range from cheaper than the aforementioned Logitech wheels to more expensive. The main difference between the Logitech and Thrustmaster wheels is the way the force feedback is delivered. Force feedback is basically the measure of force that your wheel has to translate everything happening with your car to your hands. Meaning having a good amount of force feedback and being able to tell exactly what the track surface is like and what your car is doing could be the difference between placing first and last. Typically, the more force feedback you have, the better. For instance, the Logitech G29 has just 2.2 Nm of torque, whereas the Thrustmaster T300 has double that. The Thrustmaster wheels are also belt driven, whilst the Logitech's are cog driven. In a nutshell, belt driven wheels are superior because they give you smoother, more detailed feedback. They're also a hell of a lot quieter, but the caveat to this is they're more prone to failure. So now you've got your wheel, you'll need somewhere to mount it. Let's talk about wheel stands and cockpits. If you have a tiny budget, however, and you're trying to minimise your net spend on getting into sim racing, you'll not need either of these. In fact, you can mount both the Logitech and Thrustmaster offerings directly to your office desk. This kind of setup isn't perfect, but it should get the job done. The wheel stand I started with is the Wheelstand Pro. The Wheelstand Pro retails at around 90 Great British pounds or around $120 US. It's compatible with both Logitech and Thrustmaster and should be sufficient while you dip your toes into the sim racing world. The Wheelstand Pro is sturdy enough to race consistently, and it has a very solid metal design which can be folded down into a small form factor package if you're short on space. Up next is the GT Omega Apex. This is another foldable stand for your wheel that features a sturdy design. It's also more adjustable, meaning you can find your ideal seating position. Ergonomics are very important in sim racing, and it is something you should prioritise on getting correct. It will simply increase your enjoyment of sim racing tenfold. The Omega Apex is a touch more expensive, retailing at around 100 Great British pounds or $130 US. Finally, we have the Next Level Racing GT Lite. Now this is a fully foldable cockpit which includes a seat. It retails at almost double the price of the Omega Apex, but in my opinion it is totally worth it. Having the seat incorporated into the design is so much better for ergonomics than simply sitting on an office chair. It enables you to sim race a lot longer, get immersed into it, and ultimately lets you have more fun without worrying about backache. Now that you have your sim rig ready to go, we of course need to talk about games. Pretty much every sim racing title can be picked up relatively cheap in video game terms, so I'm briefly going to touch on a few of my favourites. In 2020, the website Race Department held a poll asking sim racers to vote on which they believed the best racing sims to be. Sim racers ranked Assetto Corsa as the king of all racing sims, and I wholeheartedly agree with this. Assetto Corsa is the cheapest racing sim out there, and is the one you'll likely spend the most time in. Assetto Corsa was released in 2014, so it's no spring chicken, but the massive amounts of content that the game ships with, as well as all the awesome DLC and incredible modding community, still make this the best sim racing title 7 years after its initial release. You can do pretty much anything in this sim, from racing F1 cars at Silverstone, to free roaming the Los Angeles canyons, Tokyo expressways, or even mountain roads. You can do a spot of rallying or even drift if that's more your style. The possibilities are literally endless in Assetto Corsa, with well over 10,000 community mods that add pretty much every form of motorsport you could ever want, from any era. There's even a mod called Custom Shaders Patch and Soul, which improved the graphics and weather systems, making the game look like it was just released yesterday. If you're getting into the sim racing market, Assetto Corsa should be your first purchase. It's constantly on sale, and you can even pick it up with all of its incredible DLC for just a few bucks on Steam or third-party sites such as G2A. But if you prefer dirt to asphalt, there's also a game for you, and the best part is it's absolutely free. This is Richard Burns Rally. It was originally released for the PlayStation 2, Xbox Original and Windows back in 2004. But again, the community of modders behind it have kept it alive all these years, and it is still the #1 leading rally sim. Richard Burns Rally is easily the most realistic rally game out there, and features hundreds of different stages, vehicles and online racing leagues. Richard Burns Rally is essentially abandonware, so you can go and download a modified version of it for absolutely free and legally. However, if you don't care what surface you're racing on and just want to let off some steam in a fun and casual environment, Wreckfest is your game. Wreckfest basically throws all the rules of racing out the window. In Wreckfest, your only objective is to cause carnage. Wreckfest is not much of a simulator of racing as it is crashing, and it expects drivers to get absolutely wrecked. So if you're a terrible driver, Wreckfest may be the place for you. In a similar vein, BeamNG is the place for crash simulation. Its soft body physics make for the most realistic crash simulator out there. However, Beam is not so much about crashing as being a driving simulator these days. In Beam there are a wealth of realistic open world maps that you can really just mess around with. Think of it as a driving sandbox. It gives you the tools to do anything you want, from sending huge buses down a super ultra mega ramp, to rock crawling, cruising, or even hauling cargo across a jungle clad island. Beam is quickly becoming one of my favourite simulators purely because the possibilities are endless, and the crashing physics just make it all the more fun. But if you'd like to get into some more competitive racing, I can't recommend Assetto Corsa Competizione enough. Not to be confused with the original Assetto Corsa we mentioned earlier. Competizione is the successor to the greatest sim racing title. Assetto Corsa Competizione only focuses on GT3 and GT4, so there's not much to choose from. But it does do both of these racing classes extremely well, and I would consider it the most immersive racing title on the market. It provides great ranked racing, and some of my most thrilling laps have been in this simulator. ACC can get a little pricey with its DLC, but it is totally worth it in my opinion. So that was my complete guide on how to start sim racing in 2022. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, don't forget to like, let me know what you think in the comments, or subscribe for more sim racing content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you out on the track very soon. Cheers.